For the first time perhaps this season, we saw a Falcon team that was not competitive as they got beaten badly by Eastern Michigan. We welcome in Todd Walker, the voice of the Falcons on the Bowling Green Radio Network. And Todd, is this a demoralizing loss for BG? Is there room for the Falcons to come back after a game in which they just were not in it from the beginning?
Well, I think that's the $64,000 question, right? Is it demoralizing? I think the Falcons have to build off of it. And, this is the blessing and a curse when you have a lot of youth on your team. Sometimes they don't pick up on the lessons they should, but sometimes they also don't dwell on the negatives like other people might. So we'll see. I think really, to me, this team has been receding a little bit each week. And I think it's pretty clear to me that physically, this team is starting to wilt. We knew that depth was an issue coming into the season. I think that's starting to show up. We also knew that, especially on the offensive line, they didn't have really the requisite strength and depth and experience, and that is starting to show up. The defense has been exposed more and more each week to more and more plays. And I think all of that is just compounding. This is a team that wishes it was not the only team other than Buffalo playing in the MAC on Saturday. This team could use some time off right now, and they got to wait another week. They probably could have used it before last week, to be honest about it. But you could see it the last couple of weeks. This team physically is just fading a little bit, and that's not totally unexpected. But the conference schedule doesn't leave much room for recuperating and regrouping.
Do you think this is just the classic example of the freshman, the sophomore, the young guys on this team kind of hitting that wall 3 months into the season, and when you take into consideration August being a preseason, that just 3 months in, this is the first time they maybe played this long of a football season, just the bodies aren't used to this type of wear and tear, and that's one of the things you're going to learn with experience.
Yeah, to me, I think that's a big part of what's happening, and now you're seeing it starting to manifest itself too with mental mistakes, blown coverages, pre-snap penalties, special teams gaffes. These things are things the team has not been doing in the rest of the season, these sort of mental mistakes, not that they were perfect, but there were a gaggle of them against Eastern Michigan. And I think Coach told me there were 9 pre-snap penalties, and you just don't overcome those even when you're pretty good, let alone when you're trying to build up to being in the upper half of the MAC again. You can't dig holes like that, get punts blocked and not field kickoffs and turn 2nd and 3 into 2nd and 8. That's a recipe for getting beat, and that's what happened.
Falcons will try and bounce back as they hit the road to go to Buffalo. Buffalo, never an easy place to play, and the Bulls looked pretty good last week in beating up on Akron. Yeah,
and if any team has really exposed Bowling Green the last couple of years, it's been Buffalo. I mean, they have just absolutely pummeled and bludgeoned and cudgeled and rolled Bowling Green the last couple of years. It just seemed like running backs were trampling at will up and down the field and setting records and scoring 6 touchdowns or whatever it was last year. I think the BG's got to have a little chip on their shoulder about this club, and they're still very strong. I don't think they're as strong an outfit as they have been the last couple of years, but the MO hasn't changed under Mo Linguist. It's still the same. They're running the football. They're strong defensively. They'll be at home. Clearly a big challenge for Bowling Green. The one thing you look at Buffalo, they've not been very stout defensively necessarily, and they've been susceptible to the run. Bowling Green has quietly come to fairly competent in the run game in the last couple of weeks. You look at last week, they fell behind and didn't run it much in the second half, but they averaged 5 yards a carry last week. So maybe they can control the ball a little bit, keep the scoring down to the low 20s, mid 20s, and have a chance to win.
That's interesting because historically Buffalo's been so good defensively. They've had a very stout defensive line and linebacker core going back for almost a decade now. And with that youth and experience, particularly on the offensive line for Bowling Green, you would think that'd be a matchup issue. But as you just kind of alluded to, that might be an area where Bowling Green can maybe find some areas to exploit against the Bulls.
Yeah, but again, that's on paper. You got to go out there and do it on the field, and that's a whole different story. And Buffalo last week, you mentioned they handled Akron. They have been slow starters this year, though. A couple of times they've fallen behind by multiple touchdowns early in a game. Now they've come back to win those games. Last week they did not fall behind against Akron, but they didn't exactly get out to a hot start either. That was sort of a game they pulled away as the game went on. So, you just hope Bowling Green can find the moxie for one more hard played game before their off weekend, preparing for Toledo after that. Maybe get to the finish line here, at least with a strong performance. It'd be great to pull off a road upset win, but this team's got to at least get a sense of pride back after last week's really self-inflicted blowout loss.
And that is one of the great things about sports in general and the Mid-American Conference football in specifics. You never know what's going to happen on any given football game. I want to thank Todd Walker, the voice of the Bowling Green Falcons on the Falcon Radio Network, for spending some time with us. Todd, thank you.
Always great to be with you, Mark. Thanks.